I wanted to leave most of the time tonight to a dialogue among us. I'll say a few things in introduction, but very few. Just give you some idea of the anthology and what we hoped to achieve from it. I want to say, first of all, that, you know, your name goes on a book, but that is no real proof that you wrote it. In the sense that, you know, I did an article that appeared, or an article was done that appeared in Comment is Free. Am I too loud that it's echoing? It's okay. Okay. Yes? Oh, then I'll come out looking funny in the photos. Okay. And, you know, we wrote it, I wrote it this morning, but Nina was there giving me ideas and feeding me facts and all the rest. And my name went on it, and that often is the case because we do work collectively, that it's the work of many people. And even if they didn't contribute to any particular piece, the very fact that there's an anthology is evidence that there was a movement and that there was an organization, and that organization was collectively working to do a few things. And that's what the anthology is. Now I'm going to mention the few things that it was trying to do. First of all, it wanted to be anti-capitalist from women's point of view, because we knew if it was from women's point of view, it would also be from men's point of view, but the opposite was not true. Because women are unwaged workers, most of us, in varying degrees, and we take care of everyone, and we work for the survival of everyone, and we care, we do a lot of justice work, in particular for men, but also for children, so that we are more fundamental. The work that we do and the lives that we lead are more fundamental in some respects, and more, I shouldn't say fundamental, more comprehensive, perhaps, than men. And I know from experience, because I come from a working class family which was up to its eyes and trying to build trade unions and various other things, that there would be no struggle of men, except that the women were backing them, that the women were keeping things together, and that often, even as in the great movement for the CIO in the United States, that women lined up between the police and the men and said, shoot us first. And it was that crucial moment that ensured that General Motors was unionized. So that's the first thing we've been trying to do, is to see the anti-capitalist working class struggle from the point of view of unwaged women in particular, but women in general. We were trying to do that, and we were trying to say that when we were unwaged, as I have been as a full-time housewife, that we're not even considered part of the working class, and that extended to the most of the third world, which is also unwaged. So that the conception that we met on the left was a very small portion of who the working class, who the subverters of capitalism are. We enlarged that to include all the unwaged workers, not only by gender, but in the world. So we were trying to make that clear too. The third thing we were trying to do, you know, I'm trying to figure the things we were trying to do. If you have 41 years, it'll be 41 years next month, what we were trying to accomplish. The third thing I think that we were trying to accomplish, you know, was to show that the divisions among us were really the way capitalism organizes. that it wasn't an accident, racism, that gender discrimination and that sexism weren't an accident. They were the way that capitalism organizes us to keep us divided so that they can, you know, take off the billions. And we didn't think that those divisions, we thought those divisions should be undermined, but not by hiding them. You don't undermine divisions by hiding them. You undermine divisions by making them loud and clear and specific, and then use them for target practice. You know, that I mean in an organizational sense. So that's one of the other things we tried to do. And we tried to show always not only how much we are divided, but that what we had in common had to be the basis of the struggle to organize against capitalism. That we've been trying to do that stuff, and with varying degrees of success. I can't say we won. We're living in capitalism, so we haven't. But we've won a few things, and each of the struggles that we've been involved in, we always won something, or almost always won something, which strengthened us. We never felt that if we were defeated, that that's the way to win. We don't believe in that theory, you know, that it's, what is it? It's revolutionary, that it's reformist to win. We think winning is good. And we think that when you win, you are stronger for the next struggle. And so we've tried very hard always to win something. And we've always tried that if any sector wins, how can other sectors use it to win something for themselves? So that was an important part of what we tried to do. Now, having begun with unwaged women, and having encompassed, I think, the world and trying to build an international network, which is the only way to be anti-racist. You can't be anti-racist and you're nationalist. You have to be anti-racist by showing all the divisions among us on an international level. Having done that, having addressed that with varying degrees of success, we realized that what we were doing, or at least we understood in a more precise way that what we were doing was saying, among other things, that women are responsible for the reproduction of the human race, and we began to notice, and increasingly, that most left organizations did not even discuss that. Now, I think the reproduction of the human race is rather important. It's all of us. It's our survival. It's our struggle ecologically. It's our struggle for wealth. It's our struggle for our children. That's a tremendously important question. You know, children are often neglected as the subject and the object of struggle. And it's our struggle for survival in every sense of the word. And we always ultimately have to say, well, we are struggling for the reproduction of the human race, which means we must be against the market, because it's the market which absolutely refuses to admit, or certainly not agree to, that the human race is central. The market for the coalition of the three parties that we know about, I include Labour in that, they're for the austerity, they can't seem to attack it, pardon me, that all the three parties support the market and therefore do not support as crucial the prioritizing of the reproduction of the human race. So the anthology traces over about 60 years, because I'm 82, and it's not unreasonable to begin in your 20s to write little things down. All the aspects, all the things, or many of the things that we fought for, and sometimes describing how we fought for them. And this is the last point I'll make. I had a 5-week tour of the US a couple of months ago, and I understood before too long that what people really wanted to know was really two things: whether we could win, and if so, how. They didn't want to know why. They knew capitalism. They saw Obama, whom they had had some confidence in, and saw what a disaster he was and how the military really was in charge of him. You know, they had been through all kinds of struggles. They had seen the defeat of the movements of the 60s. They had seen organizations which the movement struggled to form become NGOs or non-profits, which made the priority themselves and their grant applications. Everybody had seen it. They knew about it. You didn't have to say capitalism is bad. That would have been boring. What they wanted to know is, could we beat the hell out of them? And if you think we could, how? How should we organize? How should we prevent the organizations which we form turning against us? How could we keep track and keep control of those we appoint as our leaders? You know, how? And so the anthology, I hope, begins to reflect that struggle and that attempt to find out how. And I hope it will be useful to you if you choose to read it. Okay?
Questions,
Or discussion.
comments, anything? It's very quiet.
Because we'll hear you.
I was just interested in your comments about Obama, because I don't think he's a disaster, but I think that he had in his first term to try very hard to be acceptable for a second term. So he's succeeded in that, and now he's really going for it, as he should have been. But you know, I think these things take time, and they have to be done gradually, because, as you said, the military are on his tail all the time. So what do you think he should have done better?
One thing. There's only one thing that he should have done better. He came in the first term because there was a movement. Now, some of my friends say, no, there wasn't a movement, but I say there was. There were millions of people who not only voted for Obama, you know, racists voted for Obama. You know, that's a big moment in the United States when racists will vote for a black man. And when the head of the unions in the United States made a speech and said to his membership, there is no reason, why working people should not vote for Obama. That was a big statement. It meant his color is not our business here. Our business is to elect him. And you know what that son of a gun Obama did? Once he got elected, he took the whole organization, the whole network of millions of people who had been active and who were thrilled, and he handed it over to the Democratic Party. That meant the end of his calling on us us, you and me, out there in the US anyway, to back him in what he wanted done. The military is in control because we were not allowed by him, or we were prevented by him, better still, let's be more precise, we were discouraged by him to stand against the military and with him. Dig that. Very important. We were discouraged from supporting health care that mattered. The end of Guantanamo, we were raring for that. People in the United States would have died to close Guantanamo, but he handed them to the Democratic Party. And there, I happened to have been there after the election, and someone who had been organizing for Obama came to the home where I was staying with a woman who had been organizing for Obama. And so I heard the discussion between them, and she said, look, we have to keep fighting. One was black and one was white. This was not relevant to the discussion, but I report that. The woman for Obama said, look, we have to keep backing him. And she said, I will not support the Democratic National Committee. You can't ask me to do that. And she said, yes, but we don't have any choice. So she said, well, there's the movement outside, and I'm going to stick with that. But that's what happened with Obama. Now, many other things happened too, I'm sure, and there were so many things that happened that I know nothing about. But I know about this crucial thing, which was a mobilization that mattered, then turned over to the Democratic National Committee to be in charge of. And that is a crime that that he stands guilty of, because he prevented us from backing serious proposals which I happen to have voted, because I'm American, I happen to have voted for him, we the voters had put in our ballot for him to do. I only mentioned a couple, but that's what it was. He may be able to do a bit more now, but he's really tainted. And a lot of white people, white racists, some of them, and some of them not, a lot of white people this time said, no, they're not going to do that twice. They're not going to risk everything and put their money on a black horse, so to speak, and then the horse goes the opposite direction and doesn't go for the finishing line. They're not going to say, oh, well, I'll put my money on that horse again. That's fundamental, but it's an experience we've made. And people now know that many of us voted for Obama this second time, but not because they thought he was going to do great things. We voted for him because we hadn't voted for that black man, that white lunatic would have set his dogs, on black people in particular. And we couldn't have that happen. We had to have Obama once again, but not with any illusions, not at all.
Can I ask a question? Do people mind if we film the audience when you ask questions? Does anyone mind? Okay. Yes, the lady at the front. Do you want to get up and...
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know if it's a question really, more a point for discussion, but I feel like feminism has been quite a lot in the media in the UK at the moment, with things like Caitlin Moran and the Vagenda magazine online and Girls, the TV programme, but it's kind of feminism light. It's kind of a feminism that's like, if I look out for other women, that's enough. And I was just wondering people's views on, you were talking about feminism as anti-capitalism, and I think the two are intertwined. I think patriarchy supports capitalism. I basically don't think you can have a form of feminism that isn't radical and it works. I was just wondering what your views are on an accessible movement, an inclusive movement, whether that waters it down and whether that makes it less effective, basically.
Well, I'm afraid that feminism cracks on class lines. Feminism, you know, many feminists in the United States think Hillary Clinton is a feminist. What's her name? Natasha Walter thinks that Thatcher was a feminist. Oh, yes. And feminism has become, unfortunately, sadly, tragically, has become identified with breaking the glass ceiling. A lot of us are right down in the basement, and feminism has not been interested. Now, I don't want to read anything, but I have to tell you, it's such a good opportunity to tell you about Eleanor Rathbone. Is anybody here knows her? Yeah, yes, our people from the Women's Center, they know her.
A man at the end. There's a man at the
There's
end.
a man at the end. Is he over 60?
Yeah.
I don't know if
Yes.
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 Yeah, because Eleanor Rathbone, this is about feminism. This is about real feminism. Eleanor Rathbone was a great feminist, and she was also, in the 1940s, the most famous woman in Britain. And what Eleanor did, Eleanor came from Liverpool. There used to be two MPs that were not political parties, but that were independent university representatives, and she was an MP, an independent MP. And she came from a family of ship owners who refused to carry slaves. Now that's a very good balance out of the suffrage, and that their poverty and dependence would be ended by women having the vote. But when women got the vote, most women went for careers, and only she and some others, including Virginia Woolf, who was a real feminist, you know, she stood with women every time, including in her fiction, I might add, and some of them, you know, fought. She led the campaign for family allowance. She convinced, what's his name? I never forget it. Never know. She convinced Beveridge to include it in his report. She personally convinced him. And in 1948, the first family allowance was paid. Now, when they decided, first of all, when they agreed the Beveridge report, you know, Churchill in his brilliance thought he would give the family allowance to men. And she told him, don't. And she said it in such a threatening way, it seems, that he said, I'll never do that, I won't, no. And he backed away, and it was paid to women. And she was deeply disappointed by the amount, because she thought it would be a wage for the working class housewife, the woman who was at the bottom of the pile, the woman who was disinherited in the family, who got nothing for herself. She was a woman who fought for the Jews to be let in to Britain from Hitler's Germany. She was a woman who fought for Indian independence and confronted Nehru about the treatment of Indian women. She was a feminist, and she wanted to change the world, and she wanted to change the balance of power within the working class. And she has been written out of history by feminists. Yes. We published this book in 80-something. There are a lot of copies because people haven't bought them, but I hope that will change. And so that we can begin to see that feminism split when the suffrage was won, not only in this country but in other places for various reasons. First of all, it split on the war, because Sylvia Pankhurst was not going to a fight for any imperialist war. She was anti-war, while her family were reactionary and disgusting. And it split also on whether the promise of change for women at the bottom was going to be fulfilled by feminism. So there is a tradition. When we built the women's liberation movement in the 70s, we were all for changing the world. At least I was not conscious of women who were not for changing the world, but they were soon for their careers. And, you know, so many things have happened that feminism has not fought for or against. And one of those was the end of income support for single mothers, when that was proposed by Tony Blair's reactionary government, which called working class women, or women who did unwaged work, workless. Workless. Imagine a woman with 4 or 5 children is workless. You know, you have to be really deeply reactionary to have that view. When we fought to defend single mothers' right to benefit, we got no takers among feminists. They didn't fight for us. They didn't fight for the single mother, in spite of the fact that the single mother had had so much to do with building the women's liberation movement. They put their kids on their back and they went to this service and built this other service and were there on some picket line and were there at the meeting and demanding creches for their children so they could fully participate. You know, that we lived through, some of us, a few of us, lived through that. And we learned that the movement splits. Now, I'm not saying that's only true of feminism. Every movement has split that way. What is the man who claims, who says that Sarah, who helped Ken, who was part of... Lee Jasper. Such a reactionary. And he comes from the black movement. He's no movement at all. He is the antithesis of movement. He's what capitalism needs desperately, a black man to stand against us, and black people haven't got anything from him at all. And so that's happened with the black movement. That's happened with the anti-immigration. It's happened with every movement that we have built, and we have learned from it, which is why I said when I began, you know, people want to work out how to organize so that the very movements you form don't stand, you know, against you. You wake up in the morning and they're on the other side. And it's a hard thing to acknowledge, you know, and it's bitter. But when you see how it actually works out, you can begin to organize autonomously of that reaction and find your way. My answers have to be shorter.
Sorry, let me try and move this thing. She has got feet that get in the way. It's very troublesome.
Well, it's an autonomous movement in itself. It's not feminism. It's not a movement. But
the thing that the Global Women's Strike has done, in which you'll see in the anthology, I don't know if you've had a chance to read it yet, but it actually picks up many, many specific things that people are fighting on. You know, prostitution, benefits, war, everything. And those are the things that makes it inclusive. It's not by being anodyne and not saying anything that will offend the other side. You know, that's a way to be inclusive of the other side, but not inclusive of ourselves. I think the anthology is very concrete, and it does go into many specific examples that show that.
Thank you. I hadn't quite understood that you were saying that.
I don't know. That's